Number one then is this one on MCN tin. It might be the end of loud exhausts. So there's a company that does car mods in Yorkshire or something. Yeah, in Wakefield. And they just got prosecuted, I believe, for offering a remap for cars that's called their Pop and Bang Remap Software Upgrade. So basically, I think what that probably does is adds a little bit of fuel, almost runs with too much fuel so that there's unburnt fuel in the exhaust system, and that's where you get the afterfire, isn't it? And the after pops is when that stuff just ignites because the exhaust system is hot. And it does sound cool. It makes your car sound like a rally car, basically. But this is like a huge moment probably because there's so many companies that exist that are purely there to make your vehicle, massively in the biking world, sound better but louder but maybe less sociable. So do you think this is like...
Yeah, that's a polite way of putting it.
Yeah. What's your stance on here? Are you a loud exhaust fan or are you a stock exhaust kind of guy nowadays?
I used to get or quite like a loud exhaust, and I used to want my car to have a loud exhaust when I first passed. Of course, everyone does. And I wanted it to sound like a rally car, and the same with bikes to a degree. But I'll be honest, it was just the second bike that I had that had a ridiculous, like a cheap exhaust. It was a Beowulf exhaust on a Honda Hornet. And I absolutely hated it because you'd be sitting on, like, for most of what we're doing, it's like 40, 50, but sustained speed, right? And it would just bore its way into your ear. So you needed earplugs. And it just wound me up a little bit. It was great when you were on song, if you were actually, doing something a bit more dynamic, it was not bad, but it was too loud. And then I have changed exhausts on loads of them. I think my favourite sound was like the V7, which actually wasn't that kind of abusive to your ears because it was a little bit lower in the register, which usually sounds a bit better. But I've gotten to the point where, to be honest, I don't really care about the exhaust. I want to hear something because I want it's a full sort of experience, and it does feel lacking if you can't hear what the bike's doing. It helps you control it a little bit as well because you know what you're doing with the revs. It encourages you a little bit more as well. You sort of feel like you're going faster. So I get wanting a noise, but I think we've talked about this before. I prefer it coming from the front, like the airbox, as opposed to the exhaust where it's behind your ear. You don't really hear it, and that's just for everyone else to annoy them. So I'd prefer to have some sort of encouragement from the bike, but probably from the front. Yeah,
like the MT-09. We were talking about that at Motorcycle Live. It's got the grills now in the top of the tank that were previously on the MT-10. And so, legally, it's still within the limits at the exhaust, but in terms of the riding experience, hopefully it's a bit more exciting because it's just piping it into your face.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably in a similar mindset to you now. I used to have a really loud bike. Then I had a slightly less loud one. And then now I'm sort of enjoying bikes that are a reasonable volume level, but just have, like you say, the right timbre and depth and growl to them.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be super loud. And I think that might be a change in the sort of riding I'm doing as well, because like you say, if you're doing steady miles or motorway stuff, it does become a bit irritating. It sort of makes me think of Jekyll and Hyde, who had a Indian FTR as a long-termer. Yeah. And it has a button where you can switch between. So it's closed by default, but then you hit the button on the bars and it opens a valve. And that makes it a bit louder. But it's got me thinking, like, if this company are now unable to legally sell something that just boosts the noise on cars, like, is everybody open to potential legal problems like Jekyll and Hyde, like the kind of UK companies like Delcovic or Black Widow, and even kind of major manufacturers, I think, are very cautious of this now. Like, they don't, often exhaust say race only or track only.
Yeah.
And anything that you do get that's aftermarket or like an accessory, from an official manufacturer tends to be pretty quiet now. And it's mainly for looks. And then the other thing that I've seen as well, Triumph, a couple of years back with the Trident, they didn't even offer an accessory exhaust. They said they couldn't find any performance benefits to offer to the customer. Like, it wasn't worth developing something. It's kind of a rip-off to charge $1,000 for a nice looking pipe. But then recently they've come back with a partnership with Akropovich. And so the Tiger 900, for example, and probably some of the other newer bikes, you can get an accessory pipe now, which has been, out of their range for a while. But now they're really emphasizing the looks, I think, and also the weight loss. If you build it out
Sure.
of titanium and carbon, you can probably shave off a kilogram or two, which is pretty significant, you know. So maybe this is it, mate. And also, like, what about individuals now? I know in the MOT already, they measure the sort of sound level quite casually. Oh, but I wonder if it's going this way and you'll end up getting in trouble.
I would say I'm conflicted on it because I've not noticed that it's a huge problem, to be honest. Like, we've gotten this far with it being as loud as it is, and there is a restriction at the moment. You can't go above a certain amount, right? Legally, at least. They could still pull you over and go, your exhaust is too loud. Or, like you say, going through an MOT, or, you know, when they're passing them through these things. So, yeah, one point is that manufacturers, you're right, like there's no performance benefit to sticking on aftermarket exhaust. So the performance benefits, like you're saying, from Triumph is that it's a little bit lighter, and, you know, so there is something at least that justifies going for it, or it looks better, or it's smaller, whatever it might be. But yeah, I think I'm pretty confident they're going to take it too far and just say no noise from any vehicle, which at some point, hopefully that's way off in the distance, because I think that's unnecessary, to be honest, because vehicles make noise. And if they didn't make noise, you'd step out into the street more. I mean, like, that's what happens with electric cars anyway.
Maybe, yeah. And also, like, the other thing that is a bit sad about it for me, I get it. Look, I get, like, when there's a really loud bike going past, I'm just like, it doesn't need to be that loud. But the flip side is sort of, one of the things I love about motorcycling is all the little different interesting subcultures that people can get into, and like the retro kind of custom scene that sort of centers around the bike shed and that kind of vibe. And then you've also got like custom cruisers. They tend to be quite loud and that sort of thing. And also, to some extent, like sports bikes, they do sound good with a bit more of a rasp to them. And it just feels a bit like if people can't spend their free time doing stuff like modifying their bike to make something they're really passionate about and proud of, I'm probably being a bit like, woe is everybody, or a bit dramatic. But it's like, what are you meant to spend your time doing? It feels a little bit like a sanitization of people's lives if they're not allowed to just express themselves doing things that they really enjoy. That's kind of the downside for me, massively. Yeah. But I think you're right.
There's a balance, isn't there? There definitely is a balance, and you're right. I think sanitization is a good word to use on that one. And I think at a certain point you're going to be taking it too far, and I think they probably will at some point, much like they have with the speed limits down to 20 in Wales. Which,
mate, I don't know if we've got time to get into that. Like,
that's another article, yeah.